Awesome. So, hi everybody. My name is Sam. I'm a senior here at Clark, majoring in political science on the comparative politics track. I've taken a lot of gender classes and had conversations with a lot of my friends here at college about gender and feminism. So, for my WGS final, I wanted to do something a little different and speak with someone I don't normally talk about feminism, and politics with. We have my mom here today if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Hello, I'm Bonnie Cannell, mother of one daughter, Sam, or as I call her, Samantha.
Awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this too. Um, the first thing I kind of wanted to talk about was what does feminism mean to you, and does that mean anything different from living a feminist life?
What does feminine? Okay, it's it's ironic because I feel like when you say feminism, the um, general population find it very women being aggressive
Mm-hmm.
and and so they look at someone and then when they say they're a feminist or they find like they kind of roll their eyes that oh you're one of those and they don't realize that most fields I feel are male dominated and just to get try to get an equal say not even pay you have to work twice as hard and not get recognized.
Yeah, that's something we've been talking a lot about with the most recent reading. We've been reading a book by Sarah Med. And she talks a lot about like the different emotions attached to feminism and how anger is especially like one of the motivating ones and how women are perceived as angry because of that. And she talks about something called the killjoy a lot, kind of like what you're talking about. I mean, we both know my roommate Caroline too. That's how she identifies as a feminist. I feel like she will refer to herself as a killjoy at like Thanksgiving or like family dinner tables and stuff like that. Is that like does that kind of align with what you're
Oh,
saying?
definitely. It's like a double-edged sword. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but you know, and like when a woman is aggressive at work, they view it as aggressive. Where if a man does the same thing or says the same thing, they're like, oh, they're being assertive.
Yeah, no, I because that's something like an example from your life, right? Like, was it your last job? That was like a
Many of my jobs, and especially my last job I was at, it's aviation, which is very much male dominated, privileged white men. And majority of the leadership was male, and I worked with this woman, Liz, which was phenomenal. And she had twice as much work, and she asked for an assistant, and they said no, no, no. And then, as soon as, she leaves, they hired a younger man and gave half the responsibilities to someone else and then gave him an assistant.
Yeah.
And it was like, wait a minute, I'm sure he's probably making more money as well. But, it's more like though too. And the owner of the company was the male was like, wait a minute. Oh, here comes Liz. Oh boy, what does she want?
Yeah.
And it's like, to me, I saw her. I'm like, she was the hardest working person there. She was there before anyone else and stayed later and on weekends and
Mhm.
never complained about it. And when she asked for help, there was kind of like eyes rolled, like you can't handle that.
Yeah, no, that's kind of like I feel like that goes a little bit into my view of feminism because one of the other readers we talked a little bit about in class is Bell Hooks. And this was one of the first readings we had this semester, but I think it's probably one of my favorites. Because it's not one I talk about in any of my classes before, at least not that I remember. And the whole idea is basically like theory, like whether it's political, feminist, like any type of theory. It doesn't matter if you're like aware if you're practicing it or not. Like the act of like doing stuff like Liz, like proving herself at work or like even just asking questions, like that's like feminism in practice, even if it's not labeled as that, if that makes sense.
Mm.
Like there's one quote from her. It says, "When our lived experience of theorizing is fundamentally linked to the process of self-recovery, of collective liberation, no gaps exist between theory and practice." Yeah.
Explain that to me. I'm not quite sure if I understand that.
So like the like even if you don't label it as theory, like she gives examples of how when she was little, like her family, she had a rough upbringing. She would be like, why are we doing it like this? Or like why aren't we like this other family? Stuff like that. And she would get scolded for that a lot. And like as an adult who's like in the academic world, she looks back and she's like, that was me practicing theory in real life, even though I couldn't label it as such.
Yeah. And that's ironic you say that because my positions at work, anytime I went to a new job, I always try to make things better and more streamlined. And
Hmm.
I would ask, why are we submitting this form with this document? And their answer was, well, because we always have. I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
And they're like,
And it's
don't
almost like
don't
nobody,
ask questions. That makes more work. I'm like, no, I'm trying to make less work.
yeah.
Yeah. And it's like you're just questioning, the policies that were instilled 20, 30 years ago that nobody knows why. They just
Yeah.
doing it.
No, because like the in the quote too, like the last part, like she's talking about like a process of like self-recovery, like liberation, like that's like on a much bigger scale. But even if like you scale that down to like stuff at work like that, it's just like trying to make your day easier, the days of everybody else easier,
Yes.
like and there was kind of there's one other author that we've read that like I think about when I think about feminism, and it was from the author's Rich. And what Rich talks about kind of is how like women have a choice in society, but it's kind of narrowed down by all the well, like systems of like oppression and stuff like that, like the patriarchy.
Hmm.
Yeah. And so like I have a longer quote from him. I'll try to summarize it a little bit. Um, Here, I'll read part of it. Neglecting the covert socializations and overt forces which have channeled women into marriage and heterosexual romance, she is stuck trying to reform a man-made institution, compulsory heterosexuality, as if despite profound emotional impulses and complementaries, drawing women toward women, there is a mystical slash biological heterosexual inclination, a preference or a choice that draws women towards men. Does that make sense?
Right. Absolutely. Because,
Hmm.
it's the
It's the
box that,
illusion of a choice.
well, yeah. So, like, this is the interesting part. So, perfect examples when, I had my daughter, you, um, I wanted to stay home with you. So, daddy wanted, to him, that was great that I stayed home with you, but he felt a lot of pressure that all the money responsibility was on him. And if
Hmm.
something happened, it would be horrible. And, he couldn't wait for me to get back to work.
Hmm.
So, when I went back to work when you were in kindergarten, no, so no, let's go back place when I was staying home with you. I did all the traditional, wife
Yeah.
stuff like laundry, cooking, cleaning, errands. I mean, like all that stuff.
Yeah, but
And
also if I can say something too, like would that choice itself not also be like a feminist choice because you have the ability?
absolutely,
Yeah.
you don't often see stay-at-home dads.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's kind of like, who are you? But
Yeah.
But this is the ironic part, right? So I go back to work part time and then it turns into full time. However, all those duties or obligations I did when you were, at home, I continue to do the cooking, the cleaning, the
Yeah.
laundry. It's like, wait a minute, how, like the pendulum didn't sway at all.
Hmm.
And, but so that was hard. And you're thinking about it. It's like, wow, there's so much more. It's just expected of women. It's just, I
Yeah.
mean, I know it's changing, but slowly. But unfortunately, there's lot more closed mindedness about, oh, a man's supposed to, you're supposed to make the dinner. And it's like, well, wait a minute. Why can't I come home and you make it? Or,
Yeah.
we work on a plan and share it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So that's very interesting, and it's very frustrating too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever have like a conversation about like how that wasn't shifting after you went back to work full time?
Well, there was a couple times I remember before I went back to the traditional job setting, we had a small business that we would work. And I did a lot of it at home. We would buy and resell items. And so I did a lot of the work, buying it, ticketing it, and getting all ready and everything else. And and then daddy was interesting because, he would do all the driving on the weekends. I said, basically, you're just the chauffeur. I do all the work. And he just didn't see that as 50. He saw that as like 50-50. I'm like, no, I do about 90% of it.
Yeah.
It was hard for him to conceive because during the week, he thought I was home eating bonbons. And at one point there was, I would take care of all the bills.
hmm
And, I was like, all right, well, you're questioning how the bills are getting paid. Why don't you do it? Oh, no, 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 no. You got it just right. So it's a question of, I'll question you, but I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And that was our relationship. And I look back and I wish I didn't set that idea, but I felt guilt for me staying home and not contributing monetarily to the
hmm
family.
Well, it's
And
almost goes back to that perceived choice.
exactly, exactly. And it's like, if anything, it's like we're making such a bigger investment with me spending time with you and
hmm
not having childcare costs and everything else. So, yes, we made sacrifices, with having an older car, what have you, but we still had a nice house and we still went on vacations. But it was a question of, I wish I set up different standards from the beginning, but I
Yeah.
had that guilt that, I wasn't worth as much unless I was contributing monetarily.
Wow.
So yes, I will do the laundry. Yes, iron your shirt. Yeah, I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Next thing I kind of wanted to talk about was throughout the semester, we've had a few bigger themes underneath like the women and gender studies category. Um, I'll list them off, but you can have me repeat them if you'd like. Gender, sexuality, intersectionality, patriarchy, difference, and cis heteronormativity. And well, first of all, do you know what these all mean?
No,
Okay, so do you know what gender means?
yes, it's not
You know
just
the
female and man. It's how you identify. Correct?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Sexuality, like sexual preferences.
Right.
Intersectionality is like the intersection of different identities. So like you and I were white women,
Hmm.
but like somebody else could be like a black low income lesbian woman.
Like, okay.
And that's the intersection of like multiple identities, like that
Hmm.
idea. And because of that identity, somebody could be more or less oppressed within society.
Hmm.
Patriarchy, I think we went over that one earlier.
Just to refresh it.
Just like the idea that like the society was built by men for men in a sense, and that's like where
Men.
those
Hmm.
perceived choices come from. Um, Difference, just kind of the idea that like kind of like intersectionality, like differences between women kind of like are a barrier to feminism. So like black feminism versus white feminism, those groups want and need different things. And cis heteronormativity.
Oof.
Cisgender, yeah, it's a big word. Cisgender is basically when somebody identifies with the body they're born into. So somebody who's not cis is trans. Does that make sense?
Hmm.
And so like the idea that like being cis and heterosexual is normal and like perpetuated by everything in society.
Okay.
Like out of all those words, does like any stick out the most to you in your definition of feminism?
Yeah. Y- yes. I guess the inter
Intersectionality.
yes, I often think of, I remember hearing or reading about people that had a white parent and African American parent.
hmm
How they really didn't fit in either white or black worlds
Yeah.
because the black culture will be like, well, you're not all black, you're very light skinned. And
It's like
then
they're never black enough or never white enough.
exactly. And I always found that so intriguing because I'm like, wow, that's another whole like
Yeah.
world of you're not accepted by either.
Yeah, no, I think because intersectionality is the word that I think of too and like use in my definition. I remember like one of like the most powerful quotes we've talked about this semester is like, I think it's from the Combahee River Collective. Not all women will be free until Black lesbian women are free because they faced more systems of oppression, right? And like
Absolutely.
yeah. And like there's another reading too. It's a speech by Sojourner Truth. She's a Black woman, I believe in like the 1850s. It's an older speech. It's kind of interesting too because like nobody recorded it or wrote it down. So it's all kind of like hearsay if this is actually what she said. And there's like multiple versions and everything. But she essentially like repeats this phrase over and over. She'll give these examples. Like she'll say, that man over there says that women needed to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and to have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helps me into carriages or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me.
Mm.
Like, because I feel like stuff like that's really powerful too, because it's like even within like the oppression women face, there's still levels. And I don't think you can talk about feminism without talking about that.
Well, I think of feminism, and maybe it's part, maybe my upbringing, but um, a lot of times when people think of feminism, they think of strong, independent women that are sometimes um, lesbians. But you don't have to be a lesbian to be a feminism. But that's the idea of that, like, well, you don't want a man, you don't need a man.
Well,
And
there's
it's
definitely
like,
like a big stereotype.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And and because I come across that often with women my age now. They're like, well, trying to find a man and then I'll be happy. And I'm like, you don't need someone to complete
Yeah.
you.
No, when I came and sat at your work and had lunch with you and your coworkers, that was the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like, because I feel like some of my friends or like some of friends of friends here at school will talk like that. And like, it's almost like that's one of the perceived choices too. Like maybe it's more of like a perception, like actual perception in that case that like you need somebody like okay, like where am I gonna go, who am I gonna go to next? That sort of thing.
Right. That you're overlapping like Aunt Cindy.
Yeah. But yeah, no, and stuff like that too, it becomes more nuanced, like when you do add those other layers, like maybe like a different sexuality or income status, like maybe even like citizenship in terms of like immigration and stuff.
Explain that to me.
Well, like maybe somebody has like feminist ideals and wants all these certain things, but they're not a legal citizen of the country they're living in, or so they can't participate in votes or
Mm-hmm.
make meaningful change in their lives. Or maybe they are looking for somebody so they can stay in the country. Like maybe there's different motivating factors behind those choices.
Well, it takes a very brave person to come out. Um, I don't want to digress to being a lesbian or
Yeah.
gay, but going back to feminism, unfortunately, that is the tag along with it,
Hmm.
and that you're difficult, that you're rigid, that you're not approachable to have conversations, and it's just it's frustrating, and unfortunately, I think when you're in a larger metropolitan areas, it's more accepted.
Mm.
But when you live more in rural areas, like where I'm in Bangor, where there's a
Yeah.
population of 35,000 people, so you have a lot more people that haven't been outside of Maine.
Well, it's also like I think it might not be the whitest state, but it's certainly one of
It
the
is the
whitest, one
widest
of the
state.
oldest. Like,
Yeah. And so, and so you have a lot more blue collar workers
mm,
that haven't been exposed to that, and they're very closed-minded. And but that's a generational thing too. When your parents are like that and that's what you know.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the last thing I want to talk about is you and we get to pick a contemporary event and talk about it through our definition of feminism and kind of like how it might demonstrate the importance of feminism. So,
So
hmm?
what's a contemporary event?
I looked this up earlier. I think I believe it means something like happening in the present or like the future, like not like something like way far back.
So like the current election?
We could talk about that. I mean, I something like close and personal to you and I is like when I wanted to quit guide training. Like I know that's something Professor Hanley
Oh,
knows about.
okay.
Well, not this story actually, but like she knows about rafting and everything. And like so if anybody random's watching this, like my mom sent me an email in 2022 about whitewater raft guide training, and I decided what the heck, I'll do it. And then it was a lot harder than I had expected it to be, and I wanted to quit. And I sent my mother a text message at 5:30 in the morning saying, I can't do this, like I'm gonna quit, like I'll just come home. And I'm still shocked you were up. You responded within like 2 minutes, a minute. And what'd you say?
They said, "You are your mother's daughter. You are badass. You can do this."
Mm-hmm.
And but let me tell you, it was a moment in my life that I reference back to when I was a freshman in my college. I was homesick and I would go home a lot on the weekends and I would cry. And my mother, she said, you can just quit. You can transfer back to the local college and go to school here. And I remember like looking at her going, no, I have to do this. You're supposed to make me, and then if anything, that might make, no, I'm doing this. I'm not just going to
Mm-hmm.
quit. And so, that moment of like 2 minutes that I didn't respond, I was like, at first I wanted to say, oh, it's okay. You don't have to do this. But no, I'm like, no, you can freaking do this. You can do hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't want you to be afraid to do anything in life. So, and that was very important to me because, um, what kind of feeling is that, not being able to accomplish something?
Yeah.
And I think, like you said many times, it changed your direction of life.
Yeah. No, I think that kind of like goes back to like how we've really been talking at its core, like about like choices or like perceived choices. And like that was a big choice. And like ultimately, all the things we've been talking about during this have been going back against like not doing like necessarily what a woman's expected to do or not going with the like the choice, like
Mm.
actually making a choice. And I guess with from like what we've said, like that is what feminism is to us. Would you say?
Oh, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have a choice, but that's where, that moment you had a choice to make,
Mm-hmm.
and you need someone to encourage you to say that you can do it
Yeah.
versus, and like, I look at you now and how you command a boat and, talk to these adults, and you have to put them in line sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you can't just learn. You either have it, and well, you do have it, but you have to learn it too from
Yeah.
experience. And that's, I find myself as a strong woman and being able to speak up. And you're the same way, because I
Yeah.
think my goal was to raise a strong, independent, productive human being.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it.
Aw. I think if anything, too, like this conversation kind of like I think I mentioned bell hooks earlier, how like practicing feminism or theory doesn't have to be labeled as such for it to be what it is. And I think this conversation's made me realize like how many of our conversations are kind of like this. Like this is basically just a normal conversation, I feel like. And I really like that and I'm really thankful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, me too. I feel like a lot of times you're a mini version of me, and I'm scared in a good way.
Yeah.
You'll notice something that is not necessarily correct or right,
Hmm.
and you'll stand up and say something. And I've noticed over my time, I'll be at work and everyone will be complaining and need something, and I'll go in to stand up, and I'll turn around and no one's behind me. I'm like, what
Hmm.
happened to everyone? And there's that lack of confidence, and a lot of times they're women because they're like, well, I don't want to rock the boat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, someone's got to.
Hmm. Might as well be us.
Yeah, let me look at someone like, I mean, not to be sound corny, but like look at like Rosa Parks, a black woman. If she didn't, she stood up or
Hmm.
sat down.
Yeah.
Those are the important things that someone's got to choose to do. And there's that choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's slowly getting better, I feel, but it's a long way to come. And depending, it's sad. I see it definitely.
Yeah. Hopefully things will just keep slowly getting better. Awesome. Thank you, Mom. I'm gonna end the recording.